My name is Ken Hoopla of Snotty Moose Studio. I took my first trip into what would become the BWCA in 1962. So I've been coming up here for a few years. I moved permanently to the Ely area in 1978 and did my first professional guiding gig in 1982. The last guide card I had from the USDA, if I remember correctly, was in 2020. So in that span of time, I spent a lot of time out in the back country guiding people, and when I wasn't guiding people, I was taking trips on my own. A lot of those years in between, I would spend up to 40 days on the water during the summer. My day job was as a teacher in the Ely School District, and guiding was my summer job. And so I spent a lot of time out there over those years. Because of my interest in the Boundary Waters, I spent a lot of time looking at social media to see what the hot topics are. I'm what you call a lurker. I don't spend a lot of time replying or offering information or tips, because over the years I found that's a good way to get into an argument with somebody. And so I watch and see what is being talked about. I have my own ideas about it. And if I talk to people individually, I'm very happy to let those ideas be known. But for the most part, I see what's happening and I let other people handle the discourse there while I sit back and watch. One of the things that I've seen a lot of discussion about this spring happens to be what kind of footwear to use in the Boundary Waters when you're on a trip. I learned a long time ago, having taken so many people out, that there's no one answer to this question. What works for one person may not work for somebody else. What's comfortable for one person may not be comfortable for somebody else. And so, as I like to say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. But over the years, I've tried just about everything. And I'd like to just let you in on some of my thoughts as far as the pros and cons to the different kinds of footwear that people tend to wear back in the Boundary Waters. Back in the late 70s, when I started hardcore canoeing, most of the canoes were aluminum canoes. There were a few wooden canvas still around, or cedar strip canoes, but for the most part it was a Grumman or a Lumacraft or some form of canoe like that. And the tried and true footwear for that point in time were the rubber boots. Knee-high rubber boots. These happen to be muck boots, and these are kind of a later style of what we used to wear back in the late 70s and early 80s. But there were a lot of advantages to this. They have good gripping soles. They will keep you dry up to almost your knees, and are really hardy. They last a long time. When you had aluminum canoes, you weren't so concerned about what might happen to the bottom of them, and so you would put the canoe in close to shore and drag it across a few rocks in order to get it out from shore, and vice versa. When you would come into an end of a portage or a campsite, you would run the front of the canoe up onto the rocks and then step out and get your work done. Now, most times a boot with this height of leg on it was plenty in order to keep you dry. Again, you would walk up and down any portage, and just about everybody had these. They are heavy. In the summertime, when the weather is warm, your feet will sweat inside of them, and so you may find yourself with wet feet, if not cold feet, even in the middle of the summertime. Even today, where these shine is in the fall, early spring or late fall as far as camping. They keep your feet dry. Dry feet means warm feet. And if you're a little bit careful about where you enter and exit the canoe, you can get by with these for the most part. I still use these on occasion. I love using rubber boots, but there are a couple of disadvantages to them, both in weight and the clamminess that you can get in the summertime. Even in the early days, there were some people that had wooden canvas canoes and cedar strip canoes, and they weren't real anxious to drag the bottoms of those over some of the rocks. And so they would look for some alternatives to the rubber boots and getting in higher than what your knees would be and up to your thighs sometimes, depending on what the entry or exit from a portage would be. And so a lot of them turned to leather boots. Leather boots really work well for what they're intended. They provide a lot of stability. They're a material that will get wet, but usually if you're in camp and you leave them sit overnight, they dry out pretty well, pretty fast, especially in the summertime. They do have an option as far as what you have on the bottom of them, and finding something that's going to work well as far as not slipping on the rocks is definitely a big advantage. They are heavy. They do keep your feet wet all day. Usually we'd wear a pair of wool socks in these, which actually help provide a little bit of warmth, but soaked up some of that liquid when you take your feet out of them. A friend of mine and I paddled to Hudson Bay back in 2006, and we paddled about 500 miles. It took 27 days of paddling, and we used exclusively leather boots for that trip. The biggest reason being that if we got rubber boots wet, they were wet for days. They don't dry out very fast. The other big reason is that these give an awful lot of stability as far as the ankle and foot is concerned. So going across portages especially, or getting in and out of the canoe, they're a real bonus. But they are heavy. They do stay wet relatively long, but it is an alternative that was used for many, many years. As technology advanced and we got to other materials like ABS plastic and Kevlar, Duralite, some of those types of things, there was a real need to come up with a different alternative, another alternative as far as being able to get into the water and not have to worry about scraping the bottom of the canoe. They are really prone to those scrapes. In some cases, like with Kevlar, they're brittle, and if you happen to drop a canoe on a rock, you can punch a hole right into the bottom of it. So there was more of a need in order to get further out into the water and put that down higher than what regular knee boots would usually allow you. One of the earliest methods was to take just a pair of shoes, athletic shoes of some kind, hiking shoes, running shoes, whatever, and use those on your feet. They worked pretty well. They're a little heavier than some of the later things that came out, later materials that came out, but they actually worked quite well. The one thing that you didn't have with these were the high ankle guards on here, so stability was somewhat of an issue, although for the most part that wasn't a problem. As time went on, people started to get more into wading shoes like these. And some would have rubber type bottoms, some would have felt bottoms to them. And they dried a lot more quickly. They were lighter and they dried a lot more quickly. These happen to be canvas. They have holes on the side to allow the water to come out. I had a friend of mine several years ago that made his own pair of these out of a pair of basketball Keds sneakers, canvas high top sneakers, where he took basically the same thing you have here and he cut slits in the bottom to let the water run out. And he used those for years and years and years in lieu of something that he had to buy online as far as wading shoes are concerned. Taking the idea one step further, making things even lighter and more prone to drying out more quickly, some people got into using sandals like these. And I'll be honest with you, I like these. I really do. They, as far as the wetness part, you're going to get wet feet anyway, and so that isn't a problem. They are light. They have a good solid bottom to them, so that as you're going over the rocks don't dig into your feet. The toes, you need to have good bumpers on the toes here. That's important. Sometimes you'll get these with the open toes. Those don't work very well because you put your toe up against a big rock on a portage and you're going to feel it for the rest of your trip. So having good bumpers on the front of that are really nice. A couple of the downfalls of these: you don't have the stability in the foot that you would with an enclosed boot. You don't have the high heel on here or upper on it to give you the ankle support. And it does have a tendency, especially if you're in sandy or gravelly areas, to get little rocks underneath your sock or your foot in the bottom of the shoe. And sometimes, especially if you're wearing socks, you may not notice that until halfway across the portage. And what happens then, you have to decide, am I going to live with the pain until I get to the other end of the portage, or am I going to put everything down and take that rock out before I proceed? And of course, part of that has to do with whether you're on a 25 rod portage or a 325 rod portage and where you are on that portage. But actually, I still use those every once in a while. I do like them. I do find that I tend to use them more as camp shoes than I do as portage shoes, but they work for both. And I really have enjoyed them over the years, made a lot of use out of them. One of the newest technologies to come about is something that one of my clients a few years ago brought on a trip, and I looked at him and thought, that's a pretty good idea. That'd be worth trying. So basically what it is, it's a wading boot, very similar to these. It's got the good bottom on it. It's got good high top for stability. It's got good ventilation and places in order to let the water drain out, so your feet aren't sitting in water all day while you're paddling your canoe. But they're made up of two pieces. One is the boot itself, and the other is what would be the same as cutting the legs off of some waders that use wading boots. It's got a neoprene foot in it, and then a top that's waterproof. Some real advantages to this is that they are light. They are very light compared to boots or rubber boots, leather boots or rubber boots. They provide water protection for your leg all the way up, very similar to what the rubber boots used to. And they dry out fast. When I get into camp at the end of the day, I take these out, take them off, turn them inside out, lean them up against the log next to camp, and before I'm ready to go into the tent later in the evening, they're dried out and ready to go to the next day. There are a couple of drawbacks. One is that with the neoprene here for the footy, in warm weather, again, you're going to get feet that are going to sweat in there a little bit, and they tend to feel a little bit clammy after a few hours. Again, they do dry out a lot faster than a boot would here, but even so, if you're got a long day of paddling and you're out from 6 o'clock in the morning till 7, 8 o'clock at night, that last half of the day, you'll feel a little clamminess with it. Also, while these are flexible, which is nice, they also have the possibility of tearing if you happen to go through and catch them on a log or a stick as you're going across a portage. I've never had trouble with them. I've had them for a few years now. I've taken them on several trips. I've never had the problem with that. There are some people that have reported that, yes, they have had some problems with it, but I've yet to see it. These happen to be a Chota brand. Both the boots are Chotas and the tops innards archotas. I'm sure there's other companies that make these. They tend to be a little spendy, but I've used them in the summer and I've used them late in the fall and into October. And they keep my feet warm, they keep my feet dry, they're light and easy to deal with. So as we go through all of the options here, you know, I kind of gave the pros and cons of all of them. They all can work. They all have some limitations. And so you have to decide what are your goals and what ways do you travel that would necessitate one of these choices over another. I can live with any of these at any time, but everybody's a little bit different. Everybody has a little different needs and comfort level, and so consequently you have to decide. If you go on to a Facebook forum and you say, what's the best footwear for in the boundary waters, you're going to get 1,001 answers, and everybody's going to have their own opinion. And like I said earlier in the video, what works for one is not necessarily going to work for somebody else. I've had the ability to try everything out. I've used all of these on multiple trips over multiple years, and I know what works for me. And in all honesty, I use different boots for different types of trips I'm taking. Might have to do with what kind of canoe I'm taking. It might have to do with what kind of terrain I'm going to be going through. There are some parts of the boundary waters that are a lot rockier than other parts of the boundary waters. It might have to do with the time of year and whether I want to keep my feet as dry and warm as possible, as opposed to, I can wear something that's like this and sit in wet feet all day and it really isn't a big deal. So you have to decide for yourself, and you may find that if you don't take a lot of trips or haven't been on a lot of trips, it's going to take some experience before you find what's going to be the best for you. Don't settle on just the first thing that you wear, and don't settle on what someone else might have to say, because you have to find what's right for you. With that in mind, I'm going to close for now. I hope you enjoyed and got some information out of this little video, and good luck, and I hope you get up to the boundary waters soon.